Good evening. It is my honor to introduce our speaker today, a man whose life has been a tapestry of diverse accomplishments, Mark Price. Mark is not just a retired businessman, he's an actor, evangelist, and a force to be reckoned with in the worlds of marketing, consulting, and public relations. Beyond boardrooms, Mark's heart beats for community service. In the early 1980s, he pioneered a program that united business and law enforcement to locate missing children, an initiative that successfully reunited a missing girl with her family. Mark's commitment to personal responsibility echoes in his radio commentaries, particularly the impactful, "If not you, then who?" Assuming personal responsibility. Before his business success, Mark embraced the spotlight as an actor and stand-up comedian, leaving his mark in theaters and clubs across the country. San Diegans fondly remember his radio commentaries, and in 1983, he embarked on a new journey with his one-man biblical portrayals, performing globally and transcending language barriers. Today, we are privileged to have Mark Price share his insights, wisdom, and experiences with us. Through his performance of St. Luke in his own words, please join me in welcoming the multi-talented and inspirational Mark Price.
Yassis. You say back to me, Yassis, it's hello in Greek. Yassis. Yes, you're all Greek today. Yeah, very good. Your language is difficult for me. It's all English to me. I say to you, O Theos Mazisas. That's God with you. Say this, O Theos Mazisas. Yes, see, you are all Greek. It's so good to be with you here today. I must tell you, I'm disappointed. I am happy you invite me to deliver my lecture on my books. You know I wrote books, yes? Yes, how many did I write? Yes, it's in your Bible. Yes, you call Bible? Yes. Yeah, how many books? Let's think about this for a minute. Let's see. Two, yes. Well, I'm only going to talk about two of them here tonight, okay? I'll talk about two, but I must tell you I'm disappointed. I was preparing for the lecture, and a friend, he came up to me and he said, "What is all this you have spread out here, Lucanus? What is all this you are doing?" I said, "Well, I was asked to give a lecture on my books. Apparently, I'm only going to talk about two tonight." And I said, "This is for my lecture." And he says, "But this is a lot of things you're going to talk about." He said, "The people today, in today's world, they don't have much time. They don't have patience in the world today." And I said, well, how long do you think they have? How long will they sit and listen to me talk? And they said, "Well, they won't, Lucanus, they won't sit and listen for more than 6 hours." See, yes, you laugh because you agree with me. I cannot tell my story in 6 hours, yes? I need much more than that, yes? But so I was thinking to myself, what do you mean to him? I say to my friend, "What do you mean it's all short, no patience?" And he said to me, "Well, think of your name." He said, "What is your name?" I said, "You know my name. My name is Lucanus." And he said, "Yes, you know what they call you?" And I said, "No, what?" He said, "Luke. They can't even say your whole name. They shorten your name to Luke. It's only Luke. Lucanus is my name." And I learned that you don't have all the words that we have in Greek. For example, when you think of love, you have one word, yes? Love. You love your dog, you love your wife, and you love your food, yes? All one word. In Greek, we have three. Did you know this? We have agape, and do you know what that means? It's a selfless love. It's God's love, the kind of love has for everyone, selfless love. Then we have we have philia. Do you know philia? You have a city. What is it? Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. So philia is brotherly love. And then we have eros, which is a word for erotic love. It's the love a man has for a woman or a woman has for a man. Those are three different words for love. Yes? You have one. We have three. So everything is shortened, I think, in your world today. You don't have, I think, what it's called delayed gratification. No, everything about people of faith should be delayed gratification, yes? What do we all want? We want to be with God forever, yes? And we want to spend all eternity with God, yes? Do we have it today? No. We are preparing by getting to know God, to getting to know Jesus, to believe in Jesus, and then when we die, we have it, yes? So it's delayed gratification. The very nature of faith is delayed gratification. But in your world today, you want things yesterday. You think about it and you say, I want it yesterday, yes? So that's not right. We have to be people of faith. We have to take the time to get to know God through Jesus, yes? So I'm going to talk about my books today, and I'm going to talk about myself. So first I will tell you about myself, then I will tell you about a man named Theophilus, and then I'm going to tell you about a special person. But before I do, because I have to shorten what I'm going to say, because I can see in your face you're not going to sit there for 6 hours, I decided I would ask you to ask me questions now. So I make sure I answer all your questions. And if it is something you ask me that I'm going to cover in my lecture, I will say I am covering that in my lecture, yes? But if not, I will answer. So what questions do you have for me? How did I know who? Mary? I'm covering that in my lecture. What other questions do you have for me? It's a good question, though. Pardon?
Where did you get your faith? How did you get your faith?
Where did I get my faith? You're asking about my conversion? Good question. I'm covering that in my lecture. No, so far it's good. It means I was on the same track with you, yes? What else? Other questions do you have for me?
Who's Theophilus?
What?
Who's Theophilus?
Who's Theophilus? Did you not hear me say I'm going to cover that in my lecture? Yes, who else? What other questions do you have for me?
Where were you martyred?
What?
Where were you martyred?
Where was I martyred? And where did you read that I was martyred? No, I would like to know because I did not realize I was. No, if something like that happened, I would have known about it, I think. Yeah, no, I died quite old, actually. Maybe 80 of your years, 80 years of age. Yeah, so no, I was not martyred. I'm sorry. No, a lot of people, they like to say, well, I was martyred, and so, yes. Did I read John? Did I meet John? You're talking about the disciple, the Apostle John? Yes, I did. I'm not covering him in my lecture, so I'm happy to answer that. Yes, I met John on many occasions. Yes, it's a good question. Do you want to know if I liked him? No, you didn't ask yet. One question. Yes. Did I meet Peter? Yes, I met Peter as well. And I'm not talking about him in the lecture, so that's a good question. What else? Yes. Who was my favorite apostle? Well, let's see here. My favorite apostle. Well, I have a favorite. He was not technically an apostle, and I'm talking about him in my lecture. Yes.
When you wrote your books, did you write it or did someone else write it?
Well, that's a very good question. He asked, did I write it or did someone else write it and put my name down? No, because if they wrote Luke, I would have said, I don't know this person. No, I wrote them. I will tell you, I wrote them, but in my lecture, I'm going to tell you how I wrote them. Yes, good question. What other questions do you have for me? Yes, sir.
From whom did you get your information?
From whom? Well, that's a very, very good question. It's so good, I'm covering it in my lecture. No, I like the fact that most of your questions I thought to cover, yes? What? Anyone else? Yes?
I understand you were a physician. How did you learn that?
How did I become a physician, or how did you understand that I was a physician? Yes, I'm covering that in my lecture. That's a good question. I like that one. Yes. What else? Any other questions for me? So I want to make sure that I don't miss anything you have in your mind and your heart about me. Anyone else? Yes.
Is there anything in your life you would do differently?
Is there anything what?
Is there anything that you would have done differently in your life?
Is there anything that I would have? That is a good question that I am not covering in my lecture. Is there anything I would have done differently in my life? If I had my life to live over, I would do exactly the same. All of my life was searching for God, and that I'm going to cover in my lecture. But I would not do it. No, I hope that if I were ever to live again, I would be devoted to finding out more about God. Yes? And once I learned about Jesus, I understood much more about God. Yes? Any other questions for me?
How were your
What?
how were your writings stored?
How what?
How were your writings stored?
How were my writings
Stored.
stored? They were. I have some here with me now. They're all. No, they're all stored. They were all done on the papyrus, and they're all on the scrolls. They're all like this, and they're all stored like this. And so all of them were stored for many, many years. And not only, I'm going to talk more about this, but not only do I have the scrolls, but I have hundreds and hundreds of small pieces of papyrus where I wrote the notes. And so, and those I think maybe are still available somewhere. I don't know. I don't know what people do. People don't have a love for history that much. They destroy things, which I'm going to mention in my lecture. Any other questions for me? Yes?
Did you witness the crucifixion of Jesus?
Did I what with Jesus?
Witness the crucifixion.
Did I witness the crucifixion of Jesus? I'm covering that in my lecture. Yes.
About Paul, what got him down?
What got him down? You mean what made him depressed?
Yeah, because he seemed to be very motivated,
Yeah.
inspired.
No, yes, I was always very, very motivated, not just because of how I was raised and because of my desire to learn. I would say the main thing in my life that propelled me was a deep desire to learn more about medicine, about healing people, and about God, to discover who God was. So maybe, that's a good question. I don't remember a time when I was not happy. I think what made me down was when I was there with Paul, and he was martyred. He was martyred. Who asked me if I was martyred? I know I was not. But Paul was. And that was very depressing for me, because I was the only one there. Yes, anything else? Yes? You're timid. You ask if so timid, yeah.
Your childhood.
My childhood, yes. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What exactly, do you have a specific question about my childhood?
Like, when the children,
I was born at a very young age.
from, say, 7 to teenage.
You mean from when I was 7 until, I'm going to, I think, cover that in my lecture. I will. All right, is it time for the lecture? All right, good. No more questions? Burning in? Okay. If I forget something, you can ask at the end. All right, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. Some of you asked where I was from. I was born and raised in a place called Antioch. Antioch was part of Greece. It's Syria, but it's part of Greece. And that's where I was born and raised. My mother and my stepfather, he was a slave, but he earned his freedom. He earned his freedom, and as a free slave, he was able to work and to buy a house and buy gardens. And so that was my stepfather. I did not get along with my stepfather, but I learned something from him that, well, for the rest of my life, was probably one of the most important things I ever learned. You see, when I grew up, I always heard about something called the unknown God. Most of the people I know, the Greek people, we believed in many gods. Yes, we had Greek gods, we had Roman gods, we had Egyptian gods, but we also had the most special of the gods, which was the unknown God. And I remember my stepfather used to, every night, he would pour a glass of wine, and he would pour it out very slowly, and he said, "This is for the unknown God." Because of the unknown God, I was able to earn my freedom and get the house and the gardens. So it was a great admiration and respect for the unknown God. My stepfather and mother, they made sure I had a good education. And I learned all of the great writers and the great thinkers of the day. Plato, Socrates, Euripides, all of them, Sophocles. I loved one called Democritus. Do you know him? Democritus, he discovered atoms. Have you heard of atoms? Yes, that was 500 years before I was born. He discovered atoms. So I loved learning, and all my life from when I was little, I loved learning. And my mother, my father, stepfather, they sent me to Troas, which is Tarsus, to study medicine. And it is there that I became, someone asked if I was a physician, and I learned to be a physician. And I was a physician who many other doctors would send patients to me that they could not heal, because they said I had an ability to heal those that they had decided they could do nothing for. Later in life, I realized that maybe that was God working through me to help heal the people, yes? And so that's what I studied. All the time I was studying, I had a mind that always wanted to learn. But the main thing I wanted to learn was, who was this God? Who was this unknown God that I kept hearing about? And I had this, I don't know why I'd wake up in the morning and I would think, I have to find out who is this unknown God. And all of my life, growing up, I would ask, everyone I would see, I would ask about them. But when I was an adult, I was working as a physician. And by the way, in my day, physicians were highly respected. Are they today? Yes. Like this, you're saying, yeah? Well, in my day, I remember I heard this story when I was studying to be a physician about a man who died, and he went to the place of the gods. And they were amazed because they saw this one physician. He was being carried by about 13 or 14 people. They're carrying him. He's sitting up on this great chair, and they're carrying him around. And someone asked, "What physician is that?" And somebody else says, "Well, that's not a physician, that's one of the gods. He just thinks he's a physician." So that's how I was raised, to learn about being a physician and to grow. Well, I never stopped asking about who God is, wherever I was. And I started to learn about a group of people where I was in Antioch who came together. They believed in one God. So I started to go to their synagogue. They were Jewish. And I went to their synagogue to see, who is this one God? Maybe this is the unknown God, yes? And the more I would go, the more I realized they wanted me to become Jewish. But I did not want to become Jewish. I just wanted to find out who this God was, yes? So I kept asking. I met a group of people called God-fearers. Have you heard of these? God-fearers were people who were like me, who were looking for the one God, but they did not want to become Jewish. And they started inviting me to lectures, and I went to lectures. And the more lectures I went to, I started learning about this man named Jesus. And the more I learned about Jesus, I learned about a man who started churches there in Antioch. And his name was Paul. Have you heard of Paul? And the more I learned about Paul, I learned that Paul was in Greece, and he was preaching, and he went into the Parthenon. Do you know the Parthenon? Yep. In the Parthenon, there is an altar to the goddess Athena, yes? The goddess of all of Athens. But did you know there's a second altar? It is the altar to the unknown God in the Parthenon. And Paul saw this, and Paul was out lecturing to the smartest people in all of Greece, the Council of Areopagus. And he's saying to them, I was just in the Parthenon, and the God that you worship in ignorance, the unknown God, is the God you come to know through Jesus. Well, when I heard that, I said, I want to know more about Paul, so he can maybe tell me about Jesus and I can find the unknown God, yes? So I started asking questions, where's Paul? Well, I met Paul. And you know, almost from the beginning, I was a friend of Paul. He was a friend of mine. I am a disciple, a student of Paul, but he used to call me a co-worker. And so I would travel with Paul many times. I met him first on his second journey, and we would travel many places together. And I kept learning about this Jesus, who Paul kept saying, this Jesus is the one, once you know him, you know the unknown God. So I wanted to know more and more. So that is how that started. And the more I was asking questions, the more I thought I should start writing this down. So that's what I did. Who asked me about did I store them or how I stored them? Yes. So what I did was I would write down on my papyrus, and I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these papyruses that I wrote. And if I talk to you and you say you knew Jesus, you met Jesus, you saw Jesus once on the road, I say, oh, tell me about it, and I'd write it all down. Every person I talked to, I'd write it all down. I kept writing it down. Do you know how I start both of my books? Let me read it to you because I want you to know. This is important. This is exactly how I wrote it. Since many have undertake to compile the narrative of the events they have that have fulfilled among us, I can't read it, I'm just going to say it. The eyes used to be better. I wrote to a man named Theophilus, and I said, I am going to write about things I have not witnessed, that I have not seen. But I'm talking to people who did witness. And I am going to attempt to retell that story. Yes? Now, who is Theophilus? Someone asked me. Who asked who is Theophilus? Someone did. Yeah. Do you know who he is? Nope. And you really want to know? Your heart is pounding for this. Yes? Okay, good. Anyone else want to know? Does anyone think they know? There are two. Yes? There are two answers to this. And both of them are correct, and they do not contradict. The first answer is there was a magistrate, a Roman magistrate by the name of Theophilus. And one of my goals in writing what I wrote was because Rome was not treating this new Christian faith with respect. They weren't allowing us to practice our faith in the same way that they were allowing Jewish to practice their faith. So I wanted to convince Rome that the Christian faith should be given the same permissions that they give to the Jewish faith, yes? So I wrote to Theophilus in Rome, but I also love the word because of what you said. What does theo mean? What did I say to you? How do you say God with you in Greek? Oh, theos mazissa. Theos is what? God. And what did I say? One of the words for love in Greek? Philia? Theophilia, Theophilus. So yes, you are right. It means lovers of God. People who love God. Do you love God? Then I wrote to you. That's who I wrote them books to, were you. And I started both of my books that way, in the same way. And I wrote to Theophilus to convince him. Now, when I met with the people, not only would I write on the papyrus, I would write what they told me exactly as they told me. I would also go and look into the Jewish scripture, because I believed, and I learned this from Paul, that Jesus was the prophecy fulfilled. He was the Jewish prophecy fulfilled. So I would go into the Jewish scriptures, I would read and read, and if I found something that paralleled what I was just told, I would write it into the margins on my little papers, yes? And I wrote this. I did this day after day after day. I did it so you don't have to do it. Thank you very much, Lucanus. Well, I told you that I talked to people who knew, who met, who witnessed, yes? Well, I wrote about the birth of Jesus. Where do you think I learned that? Who? You think I met the wise men? No, I didn't meet. No, I've lived a lot of years. I don't think I met 3 wise men. I met them from Mary. Who asked if I ever met Mary? Someone asked me that question. I said I was going to tell you in the lecture. I was invited to a house, and I was told, this is between you and me, yes? And I was told that I was going to meet someone special. I was not told who it was. And I went into the house, and this woman, she came out, and she looked me into the eyes, and she said to me, she says, I hear you want to learn about my son. As I am looking into her eyes, I am thinking I'm looking into the eyes of Jesus. And I said, yes, I would like you to tell me everything you can tell me about your son. She said, yes, I will tell you everything. Now you sit down, I am going to prepare food for you. Let me tell you, have any of you read my book? Did you notice I talk about a lot of eating? No, I talk about a lot of meals. Jesus is either finishing a meal, starting a meal, or serving a meal. Every time I'm talking about meals. Now, why do I do that? 2 reasons. One, it was the culture, yes? That was the way it was in the place they lived. It was always, you come to visit, you sit down, we eat, and then we talk, yes? That's the way it was. But the second reason I did it was because every time I wrote about a meal, I was remembering Mary serving me a meal. So she brought out food, and then she came over to me. She took my face into her hands, and she said to me, you eat this, and I will tell you all about my son. And so I started to eat, and she started to tell me. She told me about the angels that came to her and told her about the fact that she was chosen to carry Jesus into this world. She told me about going to visit her cousin, Elizabeth. Do you know Elizabeth? Yeah, many people have said that Elizabeth was barren because God was punishing her, yes? I want you to know, Elizabeth was one of the most powerful women in all of Jewish history. She was a person carrying the new Elijah, John, into the world. John the Baptist, her son, yes, you know him? Yeah, he not only was like Elijah foretelling the coming of the Messiah, he was participating in the coming of the Messiah. And this was Mary. And so Mary was saying when Elizabeth came to her cousin, the baby in her womb had leaped. And then she said that her cousin said to her, that she is carrying in her womb Jesus. And she's telling me all of this, and I'm writing it all down. I think 3 or 4 times I said, stop, I need to go and I need to write. And I would write it down, and I'd write it down, and I'd write it down. And then she'd say, you're not eating. You stop, you eat. And I went back, and I ate, and I'm eating. Well, Mary was... I have never in my life known another person like Mary. She was older when I met her, but her face was like an angel to me, yes? And then I said, I understand you were there when your son was crucified. Who asked if I witnessed his crucifixion? Yeah. No, I'm like a second or third generation Christian. I was Greek, I was not Jewish. I was born years after Jesus was already crucified and gone. So no, I did not witness it. So all that I know, I am like you. I am like you. You never witnessed Jesus, yes? You never met Jesus, but you come to faith in Jesus. I am like you. Of all of the writers of the Gospels, I am like you, the most like you. So I said, I understand you were there at the foot of the cross. And she said, yes. And she told me what she heard. She said she heard Jesus say, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You only find that in my book. You only find that in my book. And then she told me she heard Jesus say to the thief who was crucified next to him, this very day you will be with me in paradise. By the way, the word paradise in my day in the Greek, it means garden. A garden which is in the center of the palace, yes? Jesus is saying, this day you will be with me in the garden, in the center of the palace in my Father's house. And then and only in my book you find that. And then she said that she heard Jesus say, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Again, that's only in my book. And Mary told me, and that's why it's there, yes? So Mary told me this, and I kept writing it down. I said, I never saw her again after that. But I wrote everything she told me. So I'm going to tell you now about my first book. What do you call it? Gospel of Luke. Not Lucanus? Luke. Yeah. See, Dr. Lucanus, that sounds good, yes? I can trust Dr. Lucanus. Dr. Luke, I don't know. But yes, the Gospel of Luke. Yes, gospel means what? Good news. Good news, the good news according to Luke, according to me. Now, I have 4 themes in my book that were very important to me. One of them was I wanted everyone to know that Jesus loved the repentant sinner. Did you know this? Jesus was always talking about somebody who repents. He was sinning and then he repents and he comes back. I wrote in my book that all of heaven rejoices when even one person repents and comes back. This was very important to Jesus. And I wrote in my book the story of this father who had 2 sons. And one son, the youngest son, decided he wanted to leave home and he wanted his inheritance, which was interesting because he was not entitled to any inheritance. Only the oldest son. But he demanded, he said, I want my inheritance. I want to leave. So his father, loving father, gave him his inheritance, yes? And he left. And he went and he squandered all the money. He spent it all on gambling and food and women and everything that was wrong. And it was all gone. And he thought, maybe I should go home. But then his pride stopped him. He said, no, I can't go back and say that I lost everything. So what did he do? He got a job swapping out the pigs, working with the hogs and the pigs. For a Jewish person to be working with pigs, that's the lowest of the low, yes? Well, after he did this for a while, he said, I finally have to go home. I'm going to go home. I'm going to beg forgiveness of my father. And I'm going to say, you can make me a slave, but I'd rather be a slave here at home with you than here. Yes? And so he goes home. But what happens with his father? By the way, you only find this in my book. Only in my book. His father hears that he's coming from way off. And what do I write the father does? He runs. He runs to his son. He runs because Jesus loves the repentant sinner. Jesus runs to us. When we are coming back to say, I'm sorry, and beg forgiveness, Jesus is so happy, he runs to us. He runs to us, and the father put his arms around his son. He said, I want you to kill the fatted calf. I want you to get my best coat to give to my son. That is how Jesus treats the repentant sinner. When we come back, we are embraced by God. Yes? So I wanted to let everyone know how important the repentant sinner was to Jesus. Number two, the second theme I had was Jesus loved the poor. He loved the poor. I wrote, blessed are the poor, yes? What did Matthew write? He wrote, blessed are the poor of spirit. But I wrote, blessed are the poor, because Jesus really loved the poor. He loved the poor because he had a heart for the poor. He cared for the poor. He is always talking about how people should, if you love God, if you love me, you must be a person who recognizes the poor, who sees the poor, and who does everything you can to help the poor. He tells the story in my book, only in my book, of a poor man, a poor beggar by the name of Lazarus. Have you heard this? And he had, he was on the doorstep of a very wealthy man. And the wealthy man ignored him, just treated him very bad, would not even give him the scraps you would give a dog. Nothing to Lazarus, gave him nothing. And when they died, they both died at a certain time, and the rich man went to the other place, and Lazarus went to heaven. And I wrote about how he was at the bosom of Abraham, and the rich man was in the other place looking up, and he saw the Lazarus there enjoying heaven, enjoying being there with Abraham. And he said, please give me something. Give me water. Give me something. And Abraham says to him, you did not give Lazarus anything. You treated him with total disrespect. You will get nothing. And then what does the rich man say? Let me go back and warn my brothers. And what does Abraham say? Not even if a man were to rise from the dead, would they believe. Are there people today in the world, now that Jesus has risen from the dead, who still don't believe? Yes? Are there people who know that Jesus rose but don't act like they believe? Yes. So we have to be careful. Jesus loved the poor, and we have to be people who care for the poor. So I tried to make that point many times in my writings. Also, I wanted to make the point that Jesus loved all peoples. He died for all peoples, not just the Jewish people. The Jewish people had their covenant through Abraham and God, yes? But Jesus said, I'm the new covenant. I've come for all people. Look at how many times I wrote that Jesus was helping this person or that person who was not Jewish. How about the man the soldier who comes to Jesus and says, you must come to my house and you must save my child. My child is dying. And Jesus said, I will follow you and go to your house. And he says, no, I am not worthy to have you enter the house. He said, you just say the word and my child will be healed. Jesus was always telling stories, telling parables about people who were not Jewish. That's one of the reasons the Jewish people did not like him, because they thought they were so special that everything should be about them. And Jesus was saying, no, I'm here on this earth. I'm going to die for all people. And that's something that I learned from Paul. The fourth theme that I had in my writings was women. Jesus loved women. Jesus raised up women more than was normal in our day. And Paul was like this also. Many women, they say, I don't like Paul because he said this or that. Let me tell you, Paul raised up women much more than was normal in the day. And Jesus was always raising up women. Who did Jesus appear to after he rose from the dead? Mary Magdalene. Made her the first person to go and tell the world about Jesus rising from the dead. Mary and Martha, the two sisters, he talked about them. They were close friends. He went back to Bethany just because they asked, even though the last time he was there, they nearly stoned him to death. He went back for the women. He was raising up women and calling them forward to serve God and to speak about God. So in my writings, in my book, I talk many times about women. So women, that's a fourth theme that's in my book. So that's my overall view of my first book. The second book is called what? Yes, I think you call it Acts what? Acts of the apostles. I want you to know something. I did not name it. No one asked me what to name it. And so they named it. You know what I would have named it? Acts of the Holy Spirit. Yes, I would not have named it Acts of the Apostles. I would have named it Acts of the Holy Spirit. Because after Jesus was gone, it is the Holy Spirit that really led the new church. And I talked about how the Holy Spirit came on Peter when they were preaching. And how many people were baptized that one very day with the Holy Spirit? 3,000 people in one day were baptized because of the Holy Spirit. I talk about how in the early church, they pooled their money. All of their money went into one pot, yes? And they shared it. They lived a communal life, the early church. And they had a rule that not $1, not one bit of money would go to build a building until all of the poor, the hungry, the maligned, the widows, the orphans are all taken care of. Do not spend one bit of money on a building until all of the needs were met. There must not be any poor people in your area, yes? But that's how they did, and I wrote this up, how they acted. I wrote how they replaced Judas. Do you know who Judas was? Who did they replace him with? Who? Matthias. Is that what you said? Yes, Matthias. But why do you think it was important that I write that they replaced Judas? Why? Because other apostles started to die. Other original apostles started, but they weren't replaced. Why was, you think, Matthias? Because they wanted to maintain 12, because of the 12 tribes of Israel. And that was important. So I was told I should include that because that was important to the early church that they do that. So in the Acts of the Apostles or the Acts of the Holy Spirit, I talked about the growing of the church, the people coming together. And I even talked about Jesus' resurrection. Do you remember this? Yes? May I tell you what I said? Yes. Yeah, I'll tell you because I can't read it. Jesus was rising up into the skies, and many of the apostles were there. They were watching him go, and two men all in white came over, and they said, "What are you looking at?" And they said, "We're watching Jesus as he goes back up into heaven." And they said, "Well, he is going to come back in the same way he left. He is going to come back." And somebody asked about John. Who asked about John? Who? Yes, John wrote about that in what book? That Jesus was going to come back in the final days. And so what I wrote about in Acts, witnessing Jesus going up, John writes about how he is going to come back in the same way. So this book, now, what I did when I was older, I moved back to Boeotia and to Greece, and I sat down and I started to take out all my notes, all of those little pieces of papyrus, and that's when I started to write it. Now, Paul had already written his letters. Mark and Matthew had already written their books, and I used Mark for chronology in my book. But Mark, when he wrote his book, his main source were the sermons of who? Peter. My main source was Paul. That's when I wrote my book. So that was the difference. So I was not the first. I was probably the last to write my book. But I want to tell you, in the ending here, I want to tell you about Paul. Paul used to call me his beloved physician. Did you ever wonder how he could go out and get beaten near death one day and then the next day he's back preaching again? I did everything I could to keep him healthy. And I would say to him, "Now, Paul, you have to rest. You have to just sit back. You have to let God take time to heal you." And I would turn away and he'd be gone. He'd be back out preaching again. That was Paul. He had a fire. Well, at the end of his life, he was taken to Rome put on trial, and he was convicted and sentenced to death. While he was in prison in Rome, he kept writing. He wrote to his friend Timothy and many others. But I was the only one with him at the end. Everyone else had deserted him, had abandoned him. He didn't have many friends in Rome anyway, but even those that were there, they abandoned him. And I was with him. And I was with him when they took him out and they made him kneel down on the outskirts of Rome, and with a sword they cut off his head. And I witnessed it. And I just fell to my knees and I started to cry. I could not help him anymore. But I owed so much in my life to Paul. It is Paul who taught me who the unknown God was. It is Paul who taught me that Jesus is the one who leads us to the unknown God. And that was something I had searched for my entire life, and that is what Paul had taught me. And I am so blessed to know Paul, and I am so blessed to have been there with him. Yes? So I say to you here at the end, O Theos Mazisas. What does that mean? God with you. Yes? All right. O Theos Mazisas. Thank you. Now you might have other questions. Yes, sir.
You said there were two possible explanations for Theophilus.
Yeah, one is the magistrate, and the other is lover of God.
Do you have a preference? My sense is it's probably the second one.
Yeah, my preference is, the one I like the best is the second one, lover of God, but the first one was practical. Because Rome really was not treating the early Christians, known as the Way at the time. By the way, Antioch, where Luke was born and raised and lived and met Paul, that's the first place that the word Christian was ever used, was in Antioch. And in Antioch, it's also the first place that the word Catholic was used. But yes, to answer your question, yes, lovers of God is I think that probably for Luke was the main thrust, because nobody can find anybody named Theophilus in Rome. So yes, go on.
Well, it's a fictitious person, and so he's writing for this fictitious person, which could be interpreted by virtually anyone.
That's right.
Like, I am Theophilus, and I'm waiting for your message.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's true, because nobody can find a magistrate, although there are people that say there was a magistrate in Rome, but nobody historically has been able to find it. But they just discovered something else just today. I saw on the news, something new was discovered. I forget what it was. Biblically, did anyone see it? No? Okay. Yeah, they're always discovering something new, so maybe they'll find something that says Theophilus. But I think he's writing to people who love God. And Luke, when I wrote the script and studying him, it was very important to find a reason for his conversion. What was motivating him? Here was a Greek who had no religious background whatsoever, certainly wasn't Jewish, wasn't even connected to Jewish people. And yet he had this desire to know God. And the more I learned about this unknown God, and then Paul's connection to discovering the unknown God in Athens, I thought, and then Luke's close relationship with Paul for all those years, I thought that would probably make sense. And so a lot of what I write, you can't find historically, but I pray about it, and if I find that it's doesn't contradict anything, and I find that it's plausible, then I'll include it. And that was plausible, because it really was important to me to find some motivation for Luke. Why did he, because he gave up a lot of what he did. I mean, he was very comfortable as a physician in Greece, and he left it behind to go and search for this unknown God that he found through Jesus. So he was motivated. Yes? Other questions? Yes, sir.
How were you able to go in and out of Roman prisons without being subject to guilt by association?
What?
How were you able to go in and out of Roman prisons without
Oh, you're talking about Luke at the end? Luke really wasn't in prison at the end. He was held under house arrest. Something else that Luke had in common with Paul, they were both Roman citizens. Both of them were Roman citizens. Paul was a Roman citizen because where he was from, Tarsus, years before either of them were born, Rome went to battle, went to war, and Tarsus, the people of Tarsus, took the side of Rome, not knowing if Rome would win or not, and Rome won. And so out of appreciation for Tarsus taking the side of Rome, they granted Roman citizenship to the people of Tarsus. Luke, on the other hand, as a physician, Julius Caesar, the Caesar Julius, he mandated that if you were a physician and you provided medical care to Roman citizens, then you will be granted Roman citizenship. So that's why Paul was given a special death. You know, he was had his head cut off rather than crucifixion or any of the other ways they were killing him. He couldn't be scourged because he was a Roman citizen. And Luke, I think, because he also was a Roman citizen, was shown some deference. And he had the ability to be closer to Paul probably than others who were not. Because you're right, guilt by association, especially at that time, because Paul was killed at the time that Nero, the Caesar Nero, was executing Christians because he was blaming them for burning down Rome, which he did. Nero did, but God knows he couldn't be blamed for it. So he blamed the Christians. And so Peter's wife, Paul, many others were all executed in that same, 68 AD. Did I answer it? Yes.
Question. The story of the man with the two sons and the one left and then decided to come back. I seem to remember that the father, since the time that the son left, had been looking for him, watching in the distance for him. Not the way that you ended up, that he had heard from others that he was coming back.
Yeah, I didn't suggest that he hadn't been looking. I'm just saying he was told that he now is finally coming back, and the father was excited, and that's why. And the main point in the story was that he ran. That was the most important. You know, sometimes when people will forgive, we say, okay, but I'll forgive them, but I'm going to wait for them to come to me. You come all the way to me. And this is an example that Luke was trying to get across. Jesus doesn't wait. If he knows you in your heart want to be forgiven and want to ask for forgiveness, he'll run to you. And so that's it. But I don't think that in any way suggests that he wasn't looking for his son to come back at some point.
See, for me, the wording makes a difference.
Yeah.
Say our daughter has left, and every day looking for her to come back.
Mm-hmm.
That she's so important to me. I make that a priority to look her,
Yeah, I don't know that.
not wait until somebody
Yeah.
tells me.
I'd like to believe he did. I'd like to believe he did. By the way, another story that is only in my book, Luke's book, is the story of the Good Samaritan. And the reason that's there is, again, because Jesus really wanted people to know he came for everybody. He didn't, and he would put down the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, who didn't do the right thing, who ignored, that's why one of my favorite things with Jesus is when he chastises the Pharisees as hypocrites because they care more about rules. They focus more on the rules than they do people. And Jesus said, stop focusing on the rules, start focusing on people. There's only two rules you need to worry about: love God and love each other, right? And if you do those, everything else falls into place. And what I like to remind people is that God gave Moses how many commandments? 10. Yeah, it's not a trick question. He gave him 10 commandments. By the time Jesus came along, the Jewish people took those 10 commandments and turned it into 613 rules and regulations. And they believed at the time of Jesus, if you broke one of them, you broke all of them. So you couldn't, and so the focus was on the rules, not the reason for the rules. Does that make sense? And so Jesus said that's not the focus. The focus is the people. The focus is loving each other, love God. And so when I say that to Catholics, they'll laugh sometimes. And then I remind them that, well, Jesus gave us 2. We have 2,000. They're called canon law. So we've taken 2 and turned it into 2,000. Rules are good. Rules are important. They have a purpose. But if rules interfere with showing love for each other, then we have to set the rule aside for a minute. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like going to church on Sunday. There's a saying I like. Patty O'Sherry went to church every Sunday. When he died, he went to hell for what he did on Monday. It's not about the rule. It's about the reason for the rule. Does that make sense? Yeah. Other questions, thoughts? Yes, sir.
Paul wrote a lot of letters, so he's a writer. And what about Peter? Did any of them write about the chronology of Jesus?
Did any of them write about what?
Chronology of Jesus.
About the chronology of Jesus? Well, Mark and Matthew, they definitely followed a chronology, if that's what you're asking.
I was thinking Peter and Paul.
No, Paul did not write a chronology. He wrote all his letters. Half the New Testament is Paul. He was a prolific writer. We owe so much to Paul. I love Paul. I performed Paul. They filmed me doing him in 2008, and it was in movie theaters all over the country. I didn't like Paul at first. Most of my characters, I said last night, it takes me about 10 months. Once I decide to do it, 10 months of studying and researching and everything. Paul took me 20 years because I didn't like him. I had to really try to figure him out. And I studied him, and I never gave up on him for 20 years. I said, there's got to be something lovable about this guy. And the more I looked at him, now I love Paul. I absolutely love Paul. And I found out, at least what I believe, is the side of Paul that was the reason so many churches were found under him. Why he was able to write Corinthians 13, the love verses. So I love Paul. But Paul did not write a chronology. And Peter didn't write anything. Even his letters, the epistles of Peter, they were written by scribes, or not even scribes, they were written by followers of Peter. There's no record of Peter actually having written anything. So the brightest of all of those associated were Paul and Luke. And maybe that's why they formed a wonderful association, because they both were highly educated people. Yes?
The age difference in Paul and Lucas. Luke,
Yeah?
Paul, what's the age difference?
The age difference in Luke and Paul? Paul was probably 15, I'm guessing 15 years older. Luke wrote these his books, both of them at the end of his life, and he was about 80 years old when he died, Luke. Paul died in I think it was 65, and I think he was maybe 56 or something like that. So that was the age. So, but Paul was definitely older. And Luke looked up to him. And again, Paul answered the question that no one else could for Luke, and that is who the unknown God was. And that was so important. Yes. And then you. Who? Luke never married. He never had a family. He never. Paul probably did, although, and the only reason I'm saying that is one of the rules, again back to Jewish rules, one of the rules to be a Pharisee was you were supposed to be married. There were some that weren't. So Paul may have been, and his wife might have died or whatever once. We don't know. But the main thinking on Paul is that he wasn't. But Luke, we know that he was not. He made a conscious decision to not be married and to not have children, to devote his life looking for first the unknown God and the God you come to find through Jesus. He really was motivated by that desire. Wouldn't it be nice to have in our life that same kind of fervor to find God and to look for God everywhere. And that's what Luke was, and that's why we owe so much to him. And his writings are some of the most beautiful. There's stories about Luke was a painter, and they'd say he used to paint portraits of Mary. There's no real proof of that, other than a couple people have said, I own paintings that were done by St. Luke. Okay. They didn't use crayons back then. But so in my script, sometimes I'll have Luke say that he never painted Mary with paint, but he painted her with words. Because his words, he really was the most poetic of all of the writers in the New Testament. His writing, his birth narratives are absolutely beautiful, yes? And we owe a lot to Luke. So you had your hand up.
For Luke, having accompanied Paul for some time and having watched Paul convert people in a hostile environment, Gentiles, pagans, maybe a few Jews, what would Luke say, do you think, that we could imitate now to help us convert people in our hostile?
Yeah, remember, Luke was a pagan. Luke was a Gentile. Luke had no association with any faith. He believed in the Greek gods, and he believed in the Roman gods and the Egyptian gods. That's who we look to. So you're asking me how Luke would have reacted to all the people that were converted with Paul?
I'm asking, what would Luke have said, having watched Paul, what we could imitate about Paul that could help us?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I would think that be authentic. I think what he saw in Paul was somebody who truly believed what he was saying and what he was doing. Be authentic. So many people put on something, put on a cloak or put on an image. I would say Luke would tell you, you want to bring people, be authentic. Know who you are as a person of faith. Know who you are as a believer. And be authentic to everyone around you. Don't have people see you one way today and another way tomorrow. Be the same person. And that's what Paul was. And Luke saw that. And I think that's one reason Luke stayed with him as much as he did. Because you who said guilt by association, who said that? Someone over there? Yeah. That definitely was something they were worried about. I mean, that's why the apostles all hid in the upper room when Jesus was crucified. They didn't want to go anywhere near it because they were afraid they would be arrested. But Luke didn't have that fear. Maybe because he was a Roman citizen, I don't know. Maybe because he didn't care. Maybe because he believed Paul so much he wasn't going to walk away from him. He wasn't going to turn his back on him. And I would say that was probably, if Luke were to tell you what it was about Paul that brought people to faith so much, he would say Paul's authenticity, his fervor. The reality of Paul is most of us probably wouldn't like him. If we went out into the parking lot and there was some guy preaching the way Paul used to preach, we'd walk the other way. We'd try to, how do I sneak back into the church? This is a guy who was on fire for what he believed. And we say we like it, but some of us like our faith when it's nice and comfortable. When it was nice and clean, right? And guess what? It's not always that way. What I try to remind people of is that the ultimate sign of love is what Jesus did on that cross, right? That's it. And there's not a lot clean about that. He was sweating. He was in pain. He was bleeding. There's nothing clean about that. And we Christians, for some reason, we want our Christianity, but we want it nice and neat. And sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just downright dirty. One of my best stories about love, I had the opportunity to meet Richard Harris once. Do you know who Richard Harris is? An actor. For the young people, he was, I look at you because you're one of the younger here, I think. You remember in Harry Potter, the first Dumbledore? Yeah, that's Richard Harris. And for the older people, we have Camelot. He was in the movie Camelot. He was a man called Horse. He was starred in that. He was in a lot of things. And I was in Philadelphia, and I was speaking at the cathedral there, actually, in Philadelphia. This is many, many, many years ago. And I was walking through the Ritz-Carlton, which is very close to where the cathedral is. And who do I see at the bar in the Ritz-Carlton? Richard Harris. And he's drunk. And I thought, this is a good time to meet him. So I went over to him and I said, Mr. Harris, I said, I'm sorry to disturb you. I just want you to know that I'm a fan. I love your work. And he said, sit down and have a drink. So I sat down with him. And you know how when people get drinking, they start talking about all things and start trying to solve the problems of everything, right? So we at one point start talking about love. And he told me, he said, I saw true love once in my life. And I said, oh, where was that? He said, a pub in England. He said, an old couple came in, and they sat down and they ordered a cup of tea and a bicky. Now, in England, Ireland, a bicky is like a cookie, yeah? You have with your tea. And so the waitress goes off, he says, and comes back with one cup of tea and a bicky. And he said he watched as the woman took a sip of the tea and the man took a bite of the bicky. And then he said the woman took her teeth out of her mouth, the man took his out of his mouth, handed him to his wife. She put his teeth into her mouth, she took a bite of the bicky, and he took a sip of the tea. And Richard Harris said, that's true love. And whenever I tell that story, you hear some people say, yucky. Well, guess what? Sometimes true love is yucky. Sometimes it is just yucky. Sometimes after you're married for a lot of years, it's not as clean and sanitary as it once was. Sometimes it's tough and difficult and yucky, but we're still called to love each other no matter what. Jesus loved us no matter what. That was painful for him up there. And you know what makes it even more hard to get? He knew that was going to happen. He knew it was going to happen, and he didn't run away. When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he could see the temple guards coming. He could see the torches. He could hear it clanging. He told Judas earlier in the night, go and do what you must do. He knew it was going to happen. He could have run away, but he didn't. Why didn't he? Because that's why he was born into this world. To suffer and to die for you and for me. He was born into this world to express the purest form of love that we could ever have. And it's not clean, and it's sometimes yucky, but it's love. And he gave his life for us. And we have to remember that. And that's why, you know, as people of faith, there was a fella not dressed real well. One time when I was for many years, I would perform Judas. Of all my characters that I do, Judas is the shortest. It's only about 18, 20 minutes long. But I would, for 40 years, I used to do it as the homily on Palm Sunday. Now, Palm Sunday is a long Mass. It starts with the procession outside, you come in, everything is long. And yet I would come out like this and do Judas. And some churches, like Resurrection up there in Escondido, they used to have 9 Masses, and I did them 9 times. And so I'm dead by the time that, I can't do that anymore, although I did it a couple years ago at St. Gabriel's, and I think they had 5 or 6 Masses. But anyway, one church I was dressed up, makeup, everything, as Judas, because I was going to come on and do the homily. Well, one of the ushers didn't know that. And he came over to me and he said, I'm sorry, you'll have to leave. Thought I was a homeless person, wandered on in there. But see, we want our Christianity clean. We you know, God, there was a fellow who started to go to a church, and he wasn't dressed nice, and an usher went over to him and say, well, I'm happy you're here, but we don't dress like that here. He says, I'd like you to please go home, pray to God, ask God how you should dress, and then you can come back next week. Somebody told me that this is true. I find it hard to believe. The guy leaves, comes back next week, he's dressed exactly the same. The same usher goes over to him and says, "Didn't we have a talk last week?" He said, "Yes." "And didn't I tell you to go home and pray to God and ask how you should be dressed in this church?" And he said, "Yes." "Well, what did God say?" He said, "God said you haven't let him in this church for many years." And when we tell people no, we're not acting as God would have us act. We have to be open to being there for each other, to loving each other no matter what, right? One part of my ministry is called the Lay Pastor Society. I think we did it. In fact, who came up to me? Is he here now? There you are. We did it in this church years ago. It was formed in this church. It's a simple ministry where lay people take on the responsibility for 20 families. And they once a month call their 20 families. And the message is simple: I love you, I care about you, you're not alone. We started in one parish back, I think it was 1980 or 85, and over 600 started doing it around the country. But in La Jolla, I don't know if you remember my telling you this story. This woman comes up to me. I would preach at masses, inviting people to sign up for this ministry. And then I'd say I'd be outside at a table after Mass and sign up. You're not committing, you're just saying, "I'm interested." And this was at Mary Star of the Sea in La Jolla. Nice church, right? In fact, that's where I was baptized, in that church. 1956, yeah. Anyway, so I'm outside after the Saturday evening Mass, and this woman comes up. And she's dressed nice. And she says to me, she says, "Are you going to be here tomorrow?" And I said, "Yes, I'm going to be here after all the Masses." She says, "Good, I can't sign up right now, but I'll come back." And I said, "Okay." Next day, Sunday morning, first Mass, I think is 7. I'm outside afterwards. She comes up again. She says, "I can't sign up yet. You going to be at the next Mass?" I said, "Yes, I'm going to be at all the Masses." She comes up after each of the Masses, doesn't sign up. Then finally, after I think it's the 11:30 or 12 o'clock Mass, she signs up. So I don't think anything of it other than I think she's different. And then a few days later, we're doing a training session there in the parish hall. And if you know Mary Star of the Sea in La Jolla, right between the church, you're nodding, you know the church, between the church and the hall, there's like an alley, and there's an alley behind. So after the training retreat, I'm packing up everything, and the woman was there, by the way, and I'm getting ready to leave, and I walk out to that alley to head to my car. Well, who do I see in that alley but this woman, whose name I learned was Jerry Lynn, rolling out a sleeping bag? And I went over to her, and I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "You shouldn't be sleeping here." She said, "Oh, no, Monsignor said it was okay." And I said, "Monsignor should find you a place to stay." And she said, "Oh, he tried, but I told him I'll know when I need to go to another place." And I said, "Well, then I'm going to chide her a little bit." So I said, "You just signed up for a ministry that involves calling 20 families once a month. I don't see," this is before cell phones, I said, "I don't see any cord coming out of that sleeping bag. How are you going to do it?" And here's where she taught me one of the greatest lessons. That's why I remember it so well. She said, "Do you remember I came up to you after each of the Masses saying I want to sign up and making sure you were going to be there for the next Mass?" I said, "Yeah." I thought you were kind of odd. She said, "After each of the Masses, I started going and walking and knocking on doors in La Jolla, the homes around the church, beyond the church, blocks from the church. And I would tell them I'm a member of this parish, Mary Star of the Sea, and told them about this new ministry, but told them I needed to borrow a phone. And when I came to a house who were members of the parish, and they said, 'Yes, we heard that guy speak, and we'd be happy to work out an arrangement for you to use our phone.' She said, once I knew I had a phone, that's when I signed up." We want our Christianity when it's easy. Now think about this Jerry Lynn. She's in one of the wealthier parishes in our diocese, right? She saw more need in the people sitting in those pews at that church than she saw in herself. She's living on the street in a sleeping bag, and she saw more need for them to be reached out to and to be told that they're loved. That was a message. This was almost 30 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Because that's how I've met a lot of famous people, even Mother Teresa, by the way, out of that parish. Mother Teresa used to visit a woman from that parish, Dr. Anita Figueredo, and I had the opportunity to meet her, and it was wonderful. And I've met a lot of other famous people, but I've learned more from the Jerry Lynns of this world than all of the famous people that I've met. And that's what we should be open to in our life. Let's not us determine what Christianity is. Let's read the Gospels, including Luke, and learn what they say it is. And in Luke, we learn that we're supposed to care for the people who are poor. We're supposed to care for the people who the rest of the world says, I'm not interested in you, or you don't fit into our church, you don't fit into our way of life, and all the other people that the world looks the other way with. Jesus is saying we're to love them, to care about them, to be there for them, right? Mother Teresa used to say that she would look for the face of Jesus in everybody she met. And by doing that, how can you be against them? If you love Jesus, if you really do love Jesus, and you can find Jesus in the face of all the people around you, how can you be against them? I wish these knuckleheads in politics today would start looking for Jesus in each other and stop this mess that's going on. People are getting hurt, people are getting killed. And I don't care what side you're on. It's wrong no matter what side you're on. We have to learn how to love each other. And we can't be people. But it's always been that political side that has been causing problems. That's who Jesus stood up against. That's why he called the Pharisees hypocrites, right? He railed against them as hypocrites. That Jesus really was against people who positioned themselves as a person of authority but acted completely different. He had a real problem with that. So anyway, any other questions for me? I'm watching the time as I'm getting close. Yes, ma'am.
In the introduction we had today for you, they mentioned that you organized a thing finding lost children. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, the lost children? Yeah. I owned an advertising agency for 40 years, and my clients were the automobile manufacturers. And so, for example, the first one I worked with was Ford Motor Company back in the early 70s, mid-70s to late 70s, and then Chrysler. And then in 82, I took on Toyota, and I worked with Toyota. And that's when the craze of putting a picture of a missing kid on a milk carton started happening. And so I went to Toyota and I said, we're doing a huge advertising campaign up in the Bay Area, which included Oakland and San Jose and San Francisco. And I said, we're doing this mail piece. Why don't we put a picture of a missing child, talk to the law enforcement up there and see if they have any missing children, because we're sending out, I don't know, 5 million or whatever it was, pieces of mail. Let's use it for good. Remember, if you were here last night, I told you that I believe in living a seamless garment life, meaning if we're people of faith, let's be people of faith at work. Let's be people of faith at play. Wherever we are, let's be people of faith. And so I went to Toyota. I also believe in it's better to beg forgiveness than ask permission sometimes. So I went to the people at Toyota and I said, hey, I'd like to do this. I'd like to do something good, and we're sending these pieces out anyway. Let's put a picture of a missing child. And they said, well, look into it. So I got a hold of the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department, and they said, yes, there's one child in particular, a young girl we've been trying to find. And I said, if you'll give us the information, we'll help you look for her. So that's what we did. We got the picture of her, and we got information, and we sent out, like I say, a few million pieces. And sure enough, luckily, the girl found it. She saw the male piece. She was okay. She didn't know anyone was looking for her. And this was a young, maybe 13-year-old, I think 12-year-old little girl. And she didn't know anyone was even looking for her. And she saw the male piece somehow, and she called and turned herself in, and she was reunited with her family. That was, it's funny. I forgot about having done that because when they asked me, they said, send us an introduction. So introduction is sent. I don't necessarily always read what's in the introductions anymore. This is my 51st year doing my ministry, so it's a long time. And I was happy to be reminded, and I'm happy you heard that and asked about it. That was one of the proudest moments in my life, secular and ministry, to have found and reunited that child. So, yeah. Thank you for asking about it. You've made my night.
How long had she been missing?
What?
Do you know how long she had been?
Yeah, she'd been missing, I think it was like 7 months or something like that, quite a while, but long enough for them they were getting ready to call it quits, the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department, and so they took one last gamble at, let's try to find her. Can you imagine the parent? Who was saying the parent? Yeah, can you imagine that parent? Every night, is my child going to come back? Is my child? And don't you bet that when they saw her, they ran to her. They ran to her. Yeah? Okay. Any other final? Yes, ma'am.
Obviously, you've been doing these characters for a long time. We've seen you at San Rafael many times. Have your scripts changed and evolved over the years?
Have my scripts changed or evolved over the years? Not as a rule. They haven't. Luke, as I said last night, I was scared to death to come and do Luke tonight because I haven't done him in 10 years or 11 years. And I've had a lot of brain damage since then from strokes and accidents and all that kind of stuff. And I had never performed Luke as many times as I had all my other characters. So I did not know how registered it would be. And there was a lot in my performance of Luke in my script that I neglected, just because, quite frankly, I'm sorry, I just didn't remember it. But we've covered some of it here in this questions and answers. But most of my scripts, no. One line that I added at the 5 years after doing Francis of Assisi, that I really love the line, and I really want to, once I lose a bunch of weight so I can look a little bit more like him, I want to go and tape him again, because I added this line at the very end of Francis of Assisi. I have Francis say that Brother Leo asked him if he had any regrets. This is the end of it, if Francis of Assisi had any regrets. And the line that I've added, and no one has heard it because I haven't taped it, but I've written it. I wrote it like 7 years ago into the script. Is Brother Leo said, do you have any regrets? And Francis says, one. I regret that I never reconciled with my father. It never, as a guy who loves Francis of Assisi and I studied him for, like I say, 10 months as I was writing the script, it didn't make sense to me that this man could continue to hate his father, continue to be against his father. I understand why he was when he was initially, but I had to believe that he would have come to a point where he reconciled with him. And so that's why I wrote that line in. And when I performed it one time, I had this priest come up to me, and he held me. He hugged me. The priest hugged me and started to cry. And he said, I had to hear that because I've been distant from my father for many years. And hearing that told me I need to reconcile with my dad. So the reason I do what I do is to teach about Jesus, but also to motivate people maybe to think a little deeper about their lives and what's going on. So that's one line I added. One line I added to Judas as he's led the guards to Jesus at Gethsemane, I have Judas say, "Why didn't you run?" And then I added the line, "and save me from myself." So here he's blaming Jesus for not running, even though Judas is responsible, but he's blaming Jesus. So that's a line I put in, because we do that, don't we? We do that sometimes, is that when we do something wrong, we blame other people, right? So anyway, I'm talking a long time. I'm getting close to that 6-hour mark, which is... So one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. No? Okay. Yes?
Have you ever had any female contemporaries do some of the female parts of the story?
Are there female contemporaries that do this? Yeah, there have been, over the years, there have been women who have come up to me and said they wanted to do it, and I've always offered to help, and there have been a couple that I've helped. Last night I told the story that there was one woman who wanted to do Mary Magdalene, and I motivated her to do it, encouraging her to do it, but then when I saw what she did, I was not happy, because she took the secular version of Mary Magdalene, and the part of her performance was a marriage feast. We're marrying Jesus. And so I was really offended by that and bothered by that. So I didn't help her with her script. I just helped her by motivating her to follow her dream. And I'll think twice next time. But I want women to do it. I said last night, there's a lot of women out there who need to be remembered. And they need to be, when we pray the Eucharistic prayer number 1, we hear about Perpetua, right? The Perpetua, by the way, that's the name we give to Simon Peter's wife, but the Perpetua who's in the first Eucharistic prayer was a woman who was put into the arena in Rome and was sabered through by one of the Roman guards. And the guard came to her, the story goes, came to her and was going to run her through with his sword. And he looked at her and couldn't do it. So she took his sword and pulled it through herself, because she knew that if he didn't follow through, they'd kill him. That's that Perpetua. Our church, I'll end with this. One of the great things about our church is our history, and the fact that we have such a wonderful set of traditions remembering the early people of faith. All those women who were dying. Peter's wife, Perpetua, who was preaching and who also was crucified very close to the time that Peter was crucified. There are so many powerful women in our early church. Our church remembers it, but we don't spend enough time talking about it. And I would love to see some women take up some of those. Perpetua, Mary Magdalene, Mary or Martha, that kind of thing. I would love to see that. And I would love to see more people see in women what Jesus saw in them. Does that make sense? Okay. God bless you all. Thank you for letting me do this here tonight. Thank you. Drive safely. You can leave. Class dismissed. Lecture's over. Thank you guys for reminding me of lay pastors. I told you that a new church just started it up, St. Luke's in El Cajon. About 3 weeks ago, I just did the training retreat for them. It's by Valhalla High School down in El Cajon, not far from like Singing Hills Golf Course in that area. Yeah.
You were terrific, as always, from the first time we saw you 30 years ago.
Oh my gosh. God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you.
We've really enjoyed hearing you this week.
And this
Oh my
really
gosh.
It's just
Even
great,
Luke?
Great to get to see you again.
Yes, we really enjoyed it.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for coming out.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you go around and keep
Thank
coming.
you.
I'll go as soon, until he calls me, I'll keep
As
it.
you can.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you? Very, very nice. Very,
Thank you.
very nice. I've seen you once before.